Some years ago, when Carolyn used to come here on a regular basis, Sarah had made this dish. I think it's beet salad. It's actually quite delicious. And in the past, maybe 5, 6, 9, 10 years, she would always, make these comments. Oh, this is delicious. Oh, this is beautiful. If only my husband could be as seasoned as the beet salad or something. And then one day she asked Sarah for the recipe. She said, I want to learn how to make this. And so they both sat at the table for the next 3.5, 4 hours. And she just took notes. That was 5, 6 years ago. And then every time she would come here, we would ask her, so what was the beet salad? She would smile and say, I haven't really made it yet. I don't think she's ever made it. Maybe she has. Have you? No. And I think it's some ways really the answer to your question. But whether you walk into a classroom and you hear an idea that sounds good, or to put it in food terms, delicious, or if you were to read a book, or you go watch a movie, whatever the case may be, there is something rather attractive about the experience. So you go to the creator of the experience and you ask for a recipe. Say, you go sit and listen to the Buddha talk, for example. It sounds really, really good. And he talks about, there is hearing these ideas and then applying them. After the gathering's over, you go to him and you say, can you give me the recipe? And I suppose you'd have to ask Carolyn the question as to why having the recipe has not really inspired her to make the dish. First you really just have to have the need. And it's okay if you don't have the need. There's nothing wrong with it. But let's just say that Steve had come here, her husband, and he had a taste of the beet salad. And then he would come home one day and he turns to Carolyn and says, are we ever going to eat beet salad? He says, maybe one of these days. And then he says, I want some tonight. And then she's being forced by someone on the outside to make the salad, and then she does. I think it's always difficult to apply an idea, any idea. I don't mean to pick on Carolyn, of course. But they had this beautiful property. They no longer do, but they used to. They were going to build a house. There is the imagination that I have this empty lot. I'm going to build a 20-bedroom house. It's going to be beautiful. And maybe you try to apply it, bring the imagination down here and make it work, but then you realize that you just don't have the resources. There are many reasons. Intellectually, understood why my parents came here. Intellectually, I understood why they relentlessly were on my case about going to school. But I didn't have the fear that lived inside. I didn't have the excitement, the responsibility that lived inside them. So it never made sense to me to go to school and take it seriously. And I waited and waited. I mean, I just lived life until someone else walked into my life and realized, well, maybe I should do this. There are so many things that you need to sacrifice to make anything work. You know, I'm building this deck downstairs for the shed. I was going to work on it today, but then the kids said, just come out and walk around a little bit. And I couldn't bring my desire of continuing with the deck because the kids made me feel guilty. So its application just remained somewhat abstract. You know, it's one thing for someone who's 18 or 19 to be asking such a question that I think I want to change. I'm tired of my life being this way. And someone who's like 35, 40, or 50, because there's so much history to overcome. And just in case there are some very, very strong and intense components, it becomes even more complicated. You know, Lula, I can't make Oakland work for me. I've tried. Even going to downtown, going near Lakeshore, I feel as if I'm being damaged in some way. I just need to leave Oakland. That's the only way. You can't just change your interior by remaining in the same physical environment. Someone from the outside needs to just take you to a completely different place. Images are going to need to be different. Everything just needs to be different. It's true that you'll go back and forth because it is uncomfortable. None of us do well with the unknown. So you give up this and what's waiting for you. I think one of the nice things about Daughter of Fire is when you love something, it doesn't matter what it is, when you love something, sacrifice comes very, very, very easy. But loving something demands submission, demands faith. It demands being crazy a little bit. When you have some age on you, when you have some experience, your mind really works like a calculator, pros and cons. If I do this, what am I going to gain? What am I going to lose? And it's just too much. And the only way that you can make this leap is if you're passionately just involved with something. And it's not very difficult to walk away from the whole thing. in everyday real life, I think the easiest example I can give you is, you know, Pavarotti, the 60, 70-year-old opera singer. He was married for 40 years. He runs into a 30-year-old. He leaves everything. He has a reputation, and he's even willing to risk that. They told him there's a good chance that if you make this move, if you divorce your wife, no one will ever come to listen to you sing. And he just didn't care. And in some ways, I suppose it's really the story of Abraham and Isaac, or Abraham and Ishmael, that you're all placed in this position where you will be tested. You will read, for example, the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism, and you say, I really want to apply this to my life. Well, there is something you need to sacrifice. And you can't sacrifice it. If you read, I think it's Katha Upanishad, this dialogue with death, where the son sees his father sacrificing these old cows. One is blind, the other is limping. One is taking her last breath. And this kid looks at the father and says, why can't you give God some of those new cows? They're healthy. And the father keeps telling the son, you should just keep your mouth shut and just mind your own business. And there are so many also, I think, psychological components that you have to combat. We do forget. The great story in Taoism is there was this droplet. Every day, countless times, this droplet would hit this huge rock. And then someone asks this droplet, what are you doing? I'm going to crack this rock in half. Have you seen your size? Have you seen your force? And have you seen the size of this rock? I'm not really worried about that. I'm just going to keep at it. And many, many, many years pass by, and all of a sudden there is a hole inside the rock. And the hole gets bigger and bigger because of the tiny forces of the droplet. And eventually the rock is cut in half. But the point is, I think if you're able to try to apply these ideas like a droplet, it's a huge thing. You look at yourself, you're like 45, or I'm 57, and I want to change certain habits about myself. Metaphorically, I am like that huge rock. I'm not going to break. It's impossible. Most of my life is founded on that rock. And I need someone who is as, I suppose, kind and compassionate, who says, you know what, I'm willing to spend the time and the energy on Amir. I'm just going to every day give him a call. Every day go visit him, talk to him for a few hours, until little by little, something that in Persian poetry we call thief at night. You don't really know how it's happening. You keep thinking to yourself that nothing about you has changed. And then all of a sudden one morning you wake up after like 20 years and you have changed. I'm not really quite sure which approach is the best. To be simplistic in regards to these ideas and say, just keep reading the books, keep reading, going to the gatherings, keep thinking, keep reflecting, keep talking to your friends about the stuff. Or basically say it's nearly impossible. But again, if you read between the lines in Daughter of Fire, the answer is there. That this emotion called love is really the shortest and the fastest way. There is no other way. It's far too difficult. You know, I have a student, he's relatively young. He's very creative. But he breaks down all the time. I mean, every time he comes to ask a question, every time he wants to say whatever, like he starts crying. And, you know, he has good things to say. I mean, because of his age, he needs a lot of work. But, you know, it's doable. The only problem is, first you have to, you know, figure out why this person just keeps crying all the time. It just makes no sense. And then little by little, kind of approach the more essential ideas and their application. The point is there's just too many obstacles. And I think if you have someone like Ryan who's young, or any of us, but not myself, I'm not Carolyn, maybe Carolyn. But you know, when you're young, you are delusional in so many different ways, so many different branches of life. You haven't yet been worn out. Because you haven't been worn out, you have a great amount of hope. You don't even really understand. You don't really examine. But as you become more seasoned, kind of evaluate your life. So do I have the resources to make this stuff applicable for this person? If you're young, the answer is yes. Because there's a good amount of self-image of yourself you see in this other person, that if I can change this person, I will prove to myself that I can do this. When you get a little older, you don't really care about your self-image. You don't really care about what other people say about you. I think it's possible, Lula. You just need passion. And you can't do it on your own. You can't all of a sudden just fall in love with yourself. It doesn't work. You need someone from the outside. To that person, you'll fall in love. You know, and then you'll begin to be played with like a toy. And then you'll either stay or you'll go. The more you're able to stay, the more you'll begin to smell like the person you're working with. You know, and there is, when you also, you know, love someone or something, you approach it very cleanly, because what you love is up here and you are down here. You know? So you desperately need this thing. You know? But this thing over here may not really need you at all. And because you're in a weaker position, you will do whatever you can to gain the attention, gain the respect of this thing up here. And so, you know, in many ways, when you have this emotion, things just happen automatically. The only problem is it easily becomes contaminated with the other human emotions, the neediness, the expectations, and all that stuff. And there is nothing you can do about those things. There is a line by Rumi, and probably Brian can do this much better than I. آب کم جو تشنگی آور به دست تا بجوشد آبت از بالا و پست. That there's a guy running around and he keeps asking for water. And when water is given to him, he just carries the water, buckets of water. And his back is bent and he's really tired and exhausted and he's sweaty and he's smelly and he's angry. And someone looks at him and says, why do you have all this water? Are you that thirsty? He says, no, I'm not thirsty at all. Why are you carrying this water? Instead of, looking for water and then finding water and carrying water, why don't you learn how to become thirsty? Because when you become thirsty, what happens is when water is given to you, you drink it. You don't have a load to carry. You're not going to burden yourself unnecessarily. And I think it works in stages, First you have this need for information, then you have this need to feel the information, then you have this need to apply the information. And I'm not really quite sure how many lifetimes you need to first be curious enough to look for the right information if you want to make any changes to your life. Then I'm not quite sure how many more lives you have to live to be able to feel, the stuff that you know. It's not hopeless, Lula, but it's not hopeful either. I had these stuccos, they're like cement you put on the wall. I had them for 6-7 months. So when I cut the bag open, some had become really, really hard. They were just not usable. But there were some that were still powder-like. They were usable. And I think once you come to a place of need, that you desperately need to change something, what will happen is most of the ideas that you have are like the stucco I had downstairs. You come to realize most of them are really, really just useless. Out of maybe 10 pieces of information that you have, maybe half is all you need. The rest can't really do much for you. And you can't know this unless you go through the stage of experimentation where the need forces you. It's cheesy to say, but I don't think I can find any other way to say it, which is you just need that emotion. Once you have the emotion, it makes you feel really, really weak. In weakness, sure, you become angry, but you also have this new capacity to submit. You're willing to sacrifice everything. And that's the only way change can take place. And I may be wrong. I mean, we've talked about the story of Rumi and Shams plenty of times. And again, Brian probably knows the story much better than I. You're 39. You own the entire town. Everybody looks up to you. Everybody respects you, fears you. and you run into a 6-year-old man, all of a sudden you have no idea what has just happened to you. You just follow him. You do whatever he says. And then he changes. Probably a year and a half, 2 years' time. Everything about his life changes. That's 39 years of history. Just disappears. If your next question is, well, what can I do to have those emotions? The emotion of love, for example. I don't know. I don't know how anyone can. I think we all try our best. Even in basic romantic relationships, you shower, you clean the house, you cook. It's just like this person. You do 1,001 things. And in the end, when you express your feelings to this person, they say, oh, sorry, I didn't really wanted to mislead you. I have no feelings towards you. In fact, I just don't like you. But I'm in love with you. Yeah, well, that's really. That's how it is in where you make these sacrifices because you're hoping that this person will eventually feel the same way you feel about them. It's very, very complicated. Now you're dealing with a layer of complexity that I don't really know how to talk about. I think another problem is we talk about this stuff too much. Another thing that we do every week. Simply talk. Assumption is talking does anything. It does. I'm not saying it doesn't. But it really is just baby steps. You have to become paralyzed. You can't focus on your work, you can't focus on your life. You just want to know how these ideas can come to life for you. There is this cheap saying that it's said by Socrates, supposedly it's also mentioned the author of Fire, that if you want water as badly as, or if you want air as badly as a dying man, then you shall have it. For a drowning man, I don't know how you can drown someone to the point that they can beg for air. How it's done these days, I don't know.